Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze Smith Rowe's impact in the number 10 role following Arsenal's goalless draw against Crystal Palace. When we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have Arsenal in a 4-2-3-1 and Crystal Palace in a 4-4-2. So first, we're going to break down on the board how Arsenal look to approach the game with possession, and then we're going to look to a few examples to see how Smith Rowe impacted the game in that number 10 role. So when we break it all down, like I said, we have Crystal Palace in a 4-4-2, and that meant that they did drop off into two banks of four. What we ended up seeing was that Benteke and Zaha were blocking off the passing lanes into Xhaka and Dani Ceballos, but we're also looking to push forward to close down David Luiz and Holding. What we ended up seeing was that if they were looking to step forward to press the two Arsenal center backs, then you would see McArthur and Milivojevic looking to step forward to close down Xhaka and Ceballos. That meant that Eze and Townsend would step out to Maitland-Niles and Bellerin, and then Ward and Mitchell would be tight on Aubameyang and Saka. If they dropped off a bit deeper, then they would allow David Luiz and Holding time on the ball, and they would look to ensure that Xhaka and Ceballos couldn't get on the ball by blocking off the passing lanes into them. The manner in which Arsenal were able to play positive passes forward was to get Xhaka and Ceballos away from Benteke and Zaha, and there were times where you would see Xhaka dropping off to the left of David Luiz to get on the ball, and that would encourage Maitland-Niles to push forward, and Ceballos was able to evade their challenges to push forward and look to play positive passes. Out in the wider areas, a lot of Arsenal's issues stem from the fact that Crystal Palace were disciplined and organized out of possession, but over on the left, there was a lack of familiarity with Aubameyang and Maitland-Niles, and what we ended up seeing was that when Aubameyang was shifting central to occupy Ward, Maitland-Niles was unsure when to push forward to get into advanced positions. Meanwhile, over on the right-hand side, we did see some variation between Saka and Bellerin, whether it be Saka moving narrow into the gap between Mitchell and Kouyaté, and that allowing Bellerin to push forward down that right touchline. And there were times where you had Bellerin narrow and Saka looking to pick up the ball on the right touchline to cut in or drive to the byline. Lacazette in particular struggled to influence the game due to the fact that McArthur and Milivojevic were dropped off a bit deeper and looking to block off the passing lanes in between the lines. And even when you did see Lacazette dropping off, there were times where you had Milivojevic or McArthur's dropping off to close him down. And now when we focus on Smith Rowe, what we expect from him is to drop off deeper into the gap between McArthur and Milivojevic, or into the gaps between Eze and McArthur or Milivojevic and Townsend to receive possession. However, the issue that Smith Rowe encountered was that Arsenal struggled to get the ball to his feet in those pockets of space, and even when we look to an example of Aubameyang cutting across Townsend to drive at McArthur, you could see Smith Rowe in a pocket of space between Milivojevic and Eze, but when the pass is played to his feet, he has to drop off the ball quickly into the path of Bellerin as Eze steps quickly to apply pressure. That's down to Crystal Palace's shape out of possession, and the manner in which Smith Rowe was able to overcome that was by shifting out into the wider areas, specifically the touchline, to get away from McArthur and Milivojevic, who were focused on sitting ahead of the center backs to compress space between the lines, and that allowed Smith Rowe to potentially create overloads in wider areas. Townsend and Mitchell were focused on Bellerin and Saka, and Ward and Eze were tasked with Maitland-Niles and Aubameyang. And with no other players stepping out to track the movement of Smith Rowe, that meant that either Tompkins or Kouyaté had to step forward, or one of these wider players would have to step into his path, and that would leave a 3v2 advantage in those zones. Ultimately, Smith Rowe's willingness to shift into these wider areas to evade pressure was a consistent theme throughout this game, and it was how Arsenal were able to get into dangerous positions in Crystal Palace's third. And when we break down these examples, we're able to see that it's down to lack of execution when they got into these positions that led to their downfall. There was a time where Ceballos slid the ball into the path of Smith Rowe in the left channel, and we see Ward shifting across towards the ball while Maitland-Niles begins begins to push forward into vacant space due to Townsend's central position. Smith Rowe slides the ball across Ward for Maitland-Niles in the left channel, with Aubameyang running across Kouyaté and Lacazette ahead of Mitchell in Palace's penalty area. However, Maitland-Niles' left channel delivery is overhit, and it wastes a great opportunity to place Aubameyang, Lacazette, and Saka in a legitimate goal-scoring position. Shortly after that, we witnessed Ceballos sliding the ball across a narrow Eze, with Bellerin pushing forward ahead of Mitchell into the right channel, while Saka is positioned between the Crystal Palace left back and Kouyaté. When Smith Rowe receives Ceballos' pass in the right channel, he slides the ball across Mitchell in right half space for Bellerin, making a run into that zone beyond Eze, and Kouyaté can't step out because of Saka's position. Bellerin takes his time to pick out one of his three attacking teammates in the box as Eze attempts to recover his position, and his best option appears to be Aubameyang at the back post beyond Ward. While Aubameyang does get on the end of Bellerin's delivery at the back post, his attempt to nod the ball across the 6-yard box for Lacazette was cleared by Tompkins. There was a time where Saka was ahead of Mitchell in dropping off the ball to Xhaka, who shifted into an inside right position, with Bellerin unmarked in the center of the pitch, and this is where we see Smith Rowe drifting laterally across Kouyaté into vacant space in the right channel. Xhaka slides the ball across Mitchell and Eze for Smith Rowe in the right channel as Kouyaté held his position, opposed to tracking the Arsenal attacking midfielder's movement into that wide area. When Smith Rowe receives the ball, he's approached by Kouyaté shifting across and Mitchell tracking back, but he has Bellerin running off Palace's midfield duo towards the box, Aubameyang peeling off Ward's shoulder at the back post, and you could see Tompkins checking his shoulder to monitor Lacazette's movement. Ultimately, Smith Rowe's delivery into the box splits Kouyaté and Mitchell and is intended for an unmarked Lacazette as Tompkins dropped ahead of the 6-yard box, but Bellerin steps into the pass and his first touch bounces out of play. Even if we shift to the second half, you have Holding sliding the ball across Benteke, Bellerin, and Eze for Smith Rowe, shifting towards the right touchline as Saka occupies Mitchell. When Smith Rowe receives the ball, it forces Mitchell to step forward to apply pressure and opens up a gap for Saka to charge into as Milivojevic failed to pick up an Arsenal player, and we can also see Lacazette calling for the ball towards the front post. Smith Rowe's pass beyond Mitchell for Saka is slightly underhit, and it allows the Palace left back to recover and apply pressure as Milivojevic attempts to shift across and block the pullback. But here, Saka first time directs the ball into McArthur, and this should be an attempted delivery to Aubameyang or Lacazette. Later on, we see Smith Rowe picking up the ball in the halfway circle from Ceballos, and he slides it across Eze for Pepe. When Pepe receives Smith Rowe's pass towards the right touchline to pull out Mitchell, you could see Smith Rowe beginning to make a forward run while Eze is monitoring the 1v1 situation towards his left. Pepe slides the ball across the Crystal Palace left back for Smith Rowe, running beyond Eze into right half space. However, once again, Smith Rowe takes the wrong option and attempts a pullback towards the front post that is cleared by Tompkins. If we look to another example, it's Bellerin sliding the ball across Mitchell for Smith Rowe, making a run into the vacant space behind the Palace left back, which forced Eze to desperately track back. When Smith Rowe runs onto Bellerin's pass in that zone, he has Lacazette ahead of the Palace center backs, Aubameyang behind Ward, and Pepe unmarked ahead of the midfield duo in the 6-yard box. If you assess Smith Rowe's options, it looks like Pepe would be the safest bet with the pullback across Eze for a first-time effort. But what we end up seeing next is he ends up firing the ball towards the 6-yard box, and it's cleared at the front post by Kouyaté. And we can even look to examples where Smith Rowe makes the right run from those wider positions and his teammates simply don't pick him out. There was a time where Holding stepped forward into Palace's half to pull away Benteke, and ahead of the Arsenal center back is Pepe dropping to pull out Mitchell, and that creates space for Smith Rowe running off Milivojevic and McArthur into space behind the left back. But as you can see here, Mitchell doesn't step tight on Pepe and opts to hold his position, and that results in Holding playing a safe safe short pass to an unmarked Pepe before Benteke makes a tackle, rather than attempting to connect with Smith Rowe's run into that right channel. And then we could look to the time where Bellerin carries the ball towards Pepe, and with Mitchell and Eze pulled towards their markers, Smith Rowe begins to make a run into space beyond Mitchell, and neither MacArthur nor Milivojevic attempt to track his movement. When Pepe receives Bellerin's pass on the right touchline, he's closed by Mitchell and Eze, and this is where Pepe should either attempt to split the Palace duo or scoop the ball into right half space for an unmarked Smith Rowe. Pepe ends up opting to drop the ball back to Bellerin rather than playing it into Smith Rowe, who is eventually closed down by Milivojevic to halt a potential Arsenal attack. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.